Welcome back, and if this is the first time you and I are meeting on this side of the screen, understand one thing before we take another step together: there are no sacred cows in this room, there are no protected names on this desk, and there are no untouchable faves getting a soft landing in this coverage. If the person whose name is about to fall out of my mouth happens to be your favorite, your idol, your whole personality, or the reason you wake up every morning glued to a live stream, then this is your polite invitation to close the tab, back out the door, and go find peace somewhere quieter, because what is about to unfold is not going to be gentle, it is not going to be balanced, and it is definitely not going to be flattering to anyone involved. Today, right now, before the day is even done, Blueface has detonated the loudest, ugliest, most receipt-heavy tirade of his entire post-prison chapter. Chrisean Rock has been caught on her own audio unraveling in real time, and Junior, sweet, silent, invisible Junior, is once again the shadow this entire roadshow refuses to look directly at. So buckle in, because the story that has crawled out of the last 72 hours is not just messy, it is medical, it is legal, it is emotional, and by the end of what I am about to walk you through, you are going to understand exactly why this whole situation has finally crossed a line that even the loyalists are starting to squint at. Let me set the table properly, because context is everything. Blueface has been back on stream this week, and Blueface has decided that silence is not on the menu anymore. Blueface went live, Blueface pulled the microphone close to his mouth, and Blueface began delivering a monologue that read less like a rap star venting and more like a man reading a closing argument in a courtroom he built himself. The subject of that closing argument, of course, is Chrisean Rock, and the verdict Blueface is trying to sell to his audience is simple, blunt, and, honestly, a little bit devastating in its coldness. Blueface wants everyone to know that Chrisean is not his partner, Chrisean is not his priority, Chrisean is not the mother of his household, and Chrisean is, in Blueface's own carefully chosen words, nothing more than a woman he occasionally entertains when she happens to be in his time zone. Blueface has said this before, but this time Blueface said it with receipts, and that is the part that is making the internet convulse. Now let us be plain about one thing before we push this any further. Blueface is not a reliable narrator. Blueface has flipped positions on Junior more times than anyone can honestly count. Blueface has claimed the child, denied the child, hugged the child on camera, and disowned the child on a podcast, and the moment the wind changes direction, Blueface changes his story to match it. So when I tell you what Blueface is currently saying, understand I am not asking you to canonize him. I am simply reporting what has been placed on the record this week, because the record matters, and the record is starting to bury Chrisean whether Blueface is telling the whole truth or only half of it. Here is what Blueface put in the air this week. Blueface said, on stream, in front of thousands of viewers, that Chrisean has been physically hunting him around Los Angeles for the better part of a full afternoon, circling the same blocks, refreshing the same locations, driving in loops for hours on end trying to intercept him at some restaurant, some gas station, some parking lot, anywhere their orbits might collide. Blueface said Chrisean has not come to Los Angeles for a fight card, has not come to Los Angeles for a business meeting, and has not come to Los Angeles for any of the reasons her social media captions have tried to sell to the public. Blueface said, plainly, that every trip Chrisean makes to that city is a trip made because of him and only because of him, and that anything else on her itinerary is decoration to disguise the truth. And the twist, the part that made the chat lose its collective mind, is that Blueface did not just say this. Blueface backed it up with Chrisean's own voice, played straight from his own phone, in Chrisean's unmistakable cadence, admitting on tape that she had been searching for Blueface for 6 long hours across the sprawl of Los Angeles. 6 hours. Let that number sit on your chest for a second. 6 hours of daylight, 6 hours of gas, 6 hours of a grown woman driving in circles chasing a man who has told her, publicly and privately, that he does not want her back in the house, does not want her back in the rotation, and does not want her occupying any real estate in his day. 6 hours, and when Blueface hit play on that audio and pushed it through his stream, Chrisean's whole moral position collapsed on itself in front of every viewer watching. Because up until that clip surfaced, Chrisean had been holding a very specific storyline together, telling anyone who would listen that she was in Los Angeles for boxing, for business, for growth, for God, for anyone and anything other than the man who has become her personal magnet. Blueface reduced that entire narrative to ashes in one audio clip, and there is no elegant way to walk that back. But Blueface did not stop at the 6-hour drive. Blueface pushed the knife deeper. Blueface pulled up receipts, actual text messages, actual back-and-forth screenshots that lit up the entire chat, in which Chrisean is seen sliding into Blueface's phone calling him Papa, calling him Dada, offering herself up for a boat day, asking to be pulled back into the household in the exact same tone she uses when she claims on livestream that she is done, that she is healed, that she has moved on. The texts and the tirade do not match, and Blueface made sure everyone in the audience could see the gap between the two Chriseans that Chrisean tries to run at the same time. There is the public Chrisean, the one performing peace on Instagram Live, and there is the private Chrisean, the one begging her way back onto a boat, and Blueface has decided that the world deserves to see both. And here is where it gets darker, and here is where the temperature of this whole story climbs a full 10 degrees, because Blueface is once again denying Junior. Blueface has publicly stated, again, that Junior is not his son. Blueface has said that any moment in the past when he treated the child like his own was a performance, a storyline, a favor to the show and the storyline and the cameras, and not a father acknowledging a bloodline. Blueface has said the seat Chrisean once occupied in his household now belongs to another woman, that the seat is not up for renegotiation, and that Chrisean's chapter in the roadshow is closed. Blueface even taunted Chrisean about a chain she has accused him of stealing, laughing that he has no use for a piece of jewelry that's small and no interest in a woman he does not respect, and then, just to twist the blade one more time, Blueface reminded the world that he already has a woman in the house he is actually building with. That woman is Nevaeh, and Blueface wants everyone to remember Nevaeh's name every single time they open their mouths to gossip about Chrisean. Now, the Chrisean response is where this story becomes truly cinematic, because Chrisean did not go quiet. Chrisean did not disappear. Chrisean did the thing Chrisean always does. Chrisean went live, Chrisean grabbed the camera, and Chrisean started weaving a narrative in real time that painted her as the enlightened victim of an emotional predator. Chrisean told her stream that Blueface is a spirit leech, a man who feeds on the light of others, a shadow figure trying to dim her glow because he cannot generate his own. Chrisean announced that she has grown, that she has matured, that she has assembled a long roster of good people around her, that she has God on her side, that no one can steal her joy, and that the best revenge on a hater like Blueface is nothing more complicated than success. It was, on the surface, a very rehearsed and very confident monologue. But listen close, because the monologue does not survive contact with the facts. Chrisean cannot in one breath call Blueface a spirit leech and in the next breath spend 6 hours of daylight combing Los Angeles for him. Chrisean cannot in one paragraph tell the world she has evolved beyond the roadshow and in the next paragraph text the ringmaster begging for a seat on the boat. Chrisean cannot say she is done with Blueface while every visible action she takes announces the opposite. And that is the entire tragedy of this arc, because Chrisean is not fooling anyone anymore. Chrisean is running two shows at once, the public sermon and the private surrender, and the two shows are colliding on the same feed, in the same week, in front of the same viewers, and there is nowhere left for Chrisean to hide the contradiction. Let me pivot, because we have to talk about the boxing gym, and the boxing gym tells its own story. Chrisean has, over the past several weeks, been posting workout footage that is supposed to convince the public she is a serious combat athlete preparing for a serious combat career. And listen, on paper, that is a beautiful storyline. On paper, a young woman channeling her chaos into a disciplined sport is exactly the arc we should all be rooting for. But the footage tells a different story than the caption. In the most recent gym clip, Chrisean's own trainer is visibly frustrated with her, because Chrisean is once again late, because Chrisean is once again distracted, and because Chrisean is once again treating the session like a photo opportunity instead of a preparation. And then, in a moment that must be seen to be believed, Chrisean starts complaining about sweat on the floor and dirt in the corner, as if the gym owes her a spa experience while she moonlights as a fighter. The irony almost writes itself, because the same Chrisean who is now demanding a spotless gym floor is the same Chrisean who, according to multiple people who crossed paths with her in Los Angeles this week, walked into rooms smelling like a woman who had not seen a shower in days. The same Chrisean who is now performing hygiene outrage inside a training facility is the same Chrisean who was reportedly rinsing open wounds in a public beach shower in Miami not long ago and stepping barefoot into the ocean like the concept of infection was a rumor she personally invented. The double standard is grotesque, and the audience is starting to notice, and even the softest defenders of Chrisean are running out of ways to explain why the woman who has publicly disregarded her own health so many times has suddenly grown a sanitary conscience the moment a camera catches her sweating. And here comes the twist that shifts the whole tone of this coverage, because I have not forgotten what I promised at the top. I promised you a wellness read on Junior, and the wellness read on Junior is not going to be pleasant. Junior is the innocent center of this entire storm, Junior is the one human being in this saga who did not consent to a single frame of it, and Junior is once again the piece of the puzzle that Chrisean's fanbase refuses to look directly at. In the most recent stream, viewers were promised, once again, that they would see Junior meeting his developmental milestones, that they would witness the child crawling, that they would receive proof that everything the concerned commentators have been raising alarms about is nothing more than a mean-spirited exaggeration. And, once again, the stream delivered nothing of the kind. Junior did not crawl. Junior cannot see well enough to navigate any surface unassisted, and Junior did not travel from one point in the room to another point in the room under his own power. What actually happened is what has happened in every so-called milestone clip Chrisean has produced this year. The camera was angled just so, the child was placed in one location, and then the child was picked up by an adult and moved to another location, and the caption on the clip pretended a milestone had been reached. That is not development. That is choreography. And the reason it keeps working is because Chrisean has become genuinely skilled at cropping, framing, cutting, and staging content in a way that lets the loyal audience convince itself it saw something it did not actually see. Junior's feet, meanwhile, appear to be worsening. Anyone who has watched this baby over the past year knows that the shape of his little feet has been a topic of quiet concern for a long time, and in the most recent visible footage, that concern is only sharpening. And yet Chrisean continues to squeeze those feet into shoes designed for children who walk, when the child in question is not walking, has not shown signs of walking, and appears increasingly unlikely to walk without the kind of medical intervention Chrisean has repeatedly chosen not to pursue. And that raises the question the entire fanbase keeps avoiding: what exactly is the plan for this child, and who exactly is being served by the current arrangement, because it is clearly not the baby. Then there is the hernia, and the hernia is the piece of this story that should stop every single one of us in our tracks. Junior received his first hernia surgery within a month of being born. That was almost 3 years ago. And in the most recent footage, if you look at the way Junior is sitting, if you look at the way his small body curls up like a comma inside the stroller, and if you look at the visible outline of his little frame beneath his clothing, you can see the outline of a hernia that has, apparently, never fully been resolved. Somebody watching the streams recently pointed out that Junior may sit in that curled position because sitting normally puts pressure on the exact spot where his body is still compromised, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. This child has been living with an unresolved medical condition since the day he took his first breath, and the mother who is supposed to be his fiercest advocate has, over and over again, prioritized live-stream drama over pediatric care. Now, let me address the elephant in the room, the part every viewer has been quietly noticing, because the recent Junior sightings all share one strange thing in common. We do not see his face. Chrisean has become a master of walking into frame with the child, keeping the child angled away from the camera, walking back out of frame with the child still angled away, and never once giving the audience a clean, filter-free, unedited look at the baby's face. And the question that raises is not one anyone wants to sit with, but it must be asked out loud: why can we not see his face, Chrisean, and what exactly are you hiding from the people who have kept your streams monetized this long? Is he bruised? Is he swollen? Is he simply thinner than the last time we saw him? Is there something in his expression you are not ready for the public to catalog? Because a mother who is proud of her child's condition does not need to angle her body like a shield every time the child enters a camera frame. No face, no verdict. That is the phrase that keeps circling in my head, and that is the phrase this whole segment keeps coming back to, because until the audience can see Junior clearly, plainly, and without a filter smoothing the edges, the audience cannot honestly claim the child is thriving. The signal of life is one thing. Yes, we can confirm the child is alive, and thank you, Chrisean, for at least that much, but a signal of life is not a signal of wellness, and a signal of life is not a signal of care, and a signal of life is definitely not the finish line for a 2-year-old with unresolved medical needs. And here is the moment I want you to sit with, because this is the moment that separates this coverage from the noise. Chrisean, in her most recent live, described Blueface as an energy leech trying to dim her light. And I have to say what everyone watching is already thinking. There is no light. There is no light, Chrisean. There is no light in the household. There is no light in the streams. There is no light in the rotation of men who cycle through your life. There is no light in the shoes you keep forcing onto feet that need braces. There is no light in the crop of a camera engineered to hide a child's face. There is no light in 3 years of an unresolved hernia. There is nothing for Blueface, or anyone else, to leech from, because the well you are accusing them of draining has been dry for a long time, and everyone with eyes has already noticed. That is the hard verdict, and I am not going to soften it, because softening it would be lying to you, and I did not build this platform to lie to you. Chrisean is not the victim of a spirit leech. Chrisean is a young woman who was handed a second chance, a third chance, a 10th chance, and who has used each of those chances to prioritize proximity to Blueface over the actual construction of a life. And Blueface, for all his sins, and Blueface has plenty, is at least, in this specific week, telling the world the truth about the dynamic. Blueface is telling everyone that Chrisean is chasing him. Blueface is telling everyone Chrisean is texting him. Blueface is telling everyone Chrisean is booking flights around him. And Chrisean, instead of denying it with evidence, is denying it with vibes, with vocabulary borrowed from self-help podcasts, with buzzwords like leech and light and vampire, hoping that the noise of the vocabulary will drown out the receipts. It will not. It has not. It is not going to. Because the internet remembers, and the internet has receipts of its own, and every single time Chrisean opens her mouth to tell a new version of the story, someone in a comment section is pulling up an older version to hold beside it. And that is the trap Chrisean has walked into, again and again. She cannot outrun her own timeline, because her own timeline is uploaded, indexed, clipped, and archived across dozens of platforms, and every contradiction she generates is now a piece of evidence the audience uses against her in real time. Now, before we wrap this, we need to talk about the roadshow itself, because the roadshow is bigger than Chrisean and bigger than Blueface. The roadshow includes Nevaeh, includes Jaden, includes every woman who has ever been positioned inside Blueface's orbit as a rotating cast member, and includes every child who has been introduced into the storyline as a plot device. And the pattern is always the same. A woman is brought in. The woman is elevated. The woman is turned into a talking point. The woman is filmed, monetized, exposed, and eventually replaced. Chrisean thought she was the exception. Chrisean thought she was the finale. Chrisean is learning, in high-definition daylight, that she was just another chapter, and the chapter has been closed with a hard cover. Blueface is not going to reopen it. Blueface has said, in his own voice, that the seed is taken. Blueface has said, in his own voice, that Nevaeh is the current chapter. Blueface has said, in his own voice, that Chrisean can visit the city, can text the phone, can chase the boat, and can keep filing herself into his DMs, but none of it is going to buy back the seat she gave up. Chrisean is not a partner in the roadshow anymore. Chrisean is an alumnus, and every attempt to re-enroll is being politely, publicly, and permanently denied. And Junior, poor Junior, remains the ghost in the corner of every single frame. Junior is the reason we are all still watching, because the audience, even the audience that pretends this is just gossip, is quietly monitoring that baby the way neighbors monitor a house they suspect is unsafe. We are watching to make sure he is still breathing. We are watching to make sure his condition is not deteriorating past the point of intervention. We are watching because the adults around him keep giving us reasons to worry. And until Chrisean produces a full, filter-free, unedited update on that child's face, that child's feet, and that child's medical status, the watch is going to continue, and the questions are going to keep sharpening, and the pressure is going to keep building, and every single time Chrisean tries to redirect the conversation back to Blueface, the audience is going to redirect it back to Junior. So let me bring this in for a landing, because I know this has been a long ride, and I know some of you are exhausted, and I know some of you came here for the messy Blueface audio and stayed for the harder Junior conversation. Here is where we stand at the close of business tonight. Blueface has told his truth, and his truth, whether we like the messenger or not, is being backed up by texts, by audio, by timelines, and by the plainly visible behavior of a woman who cannot stop showing up in his city. Chrisean has told her truth, and her truth is being backed up by nothing except her own vocabulary, which is now recycling the same 3 self-help words on a loop. Junior has told no truth at all, because Junior cannot speak yet, and Junior may never speak the way a healthy child his age should be speaking, and that silence is the loudest single sound in this entire story. If you have been sitting on the sidelines wondering when to take this situation seriously, take it seriously now. If you have been telling yourself the concerned voices are exaggerating, look at the footage again with fresh eyes. If you have been rooting for Chrisean to prove everyone wrong, be honest with yourself about how many chances she has already been given, and how many of those chances have been converted into progress you can actually see. And if you have been rooting for Blueface, understand that he is not the hero of this story either, because a man who is publicly denying his own child, whatever the paternity truth turns out to be, is not the hero of any story worth telling. There are no heroes here. There is only a baby, a boy who did not choose any of this, and a chorus of adults who keep using him as a footnote in their own promotional cycles. And that, more than anything else in this entire mess, is the part one want you to carry with you when you close this tab and go back to your day. Do not carry the audio clip. Do not carry the text screenshots. Do not carry the 6-hour drive. Carry the child, because the child is the only person in this story who cannot carry himself. That is where we are tonight, and that is where we are going to leave it, because everything else is just noise on top of that central fact. Blueface will keep streaming. Chrisean will keep spiraling. Nevaeh will keep occupying the seat. Jaden will keep watching from the sidelines. And Junior, please, 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 let Junior get the medical attention his little body has been asking for since the day he was born. That is the only outcome that matters. Everything else is just content. Let me rewind for a second, because I want to make sure everybody sitting in this coverage understands the full weight of what Blueface actually said on that stream, not the sanitized version, not the version being clipped by the fan pages to make him look reasonable, but the full, unfiltered, uncomfortable version. Blueface, in his own voice, told his audience that Chrisean has been reduced in his mind to a woman who serves one very narrow purpose in his life, and Blueface described that purpose in the crudest possible language he could reach for, on purpose, because Blueface understands that crude language travels farther than polite language on the internet, and Blueface wanted the message to travel. Blueface said, and I am paraphrasing without quoting the vulgarity, that Chrisean's role in his life has been demoted to something purely physical, that Chrisean is not welcome back in the household, that Chrisean will not be reinstated in the roadshow, and that Chrisean can stop pretending the trips to Los Angeles are about anything other than trying to relocate herself back into a bed she was already evicted from. That is not a soft breakup. That is a public downgrade delivered in front of a chat room full of subscribers, and Blueface delivered it while sipping a drink like it was Tuesday. And here is the piece that keeps rattling around in my head, because Blueface did something on that stream that a lot of people missed on the first watch. Blueface acknowledged, on the record, that when Chrisean pulled up to the boat that Sunday, Chrisean had a flight scheduled to leave Los Angeles that same afternoon. Chrisean, on her own initiative, pushed her flight from Sunday to Monday just to sit on that boat with Blueface for a handful of hours, and then, after voluntarily rearranging her entire travel itinerary to be in his physical proximity, Chrisean tried to walk out of that afternoon acting like Blueface was the one chasing her. Blueface has receipts of that flight change. Blueface described it in specific detail. And every time Chrisean opens her mouth to say she was in Los Angeles for anyone or anything other than the man she claims she does not want, the audience now has a very specific counterexample to hold up against her, courtesy of Blueface's own timeline. That is what checkmate sounds like in the streaming era. Then there is the chain. And listen, on the surface, the chain feels like a small detail, the kind of accessory drama that ordinarily would not deserve a paragraph in a serious coverage of this story. But the chain matters, because the chain is the smallest possible object that Chrisean chose to build an entire accusation around, and the size of the object relative to the size of the accusation tells you something important about the accuser. Chrisean went public alleging that Blueface stole a chain from her, that she left the chain in his vehicle, and that Blueface walked away with it. Blueface, on his stream, laughed at the accusation, held his hands out to demonstrate the modest size of the piece in question, and asked the audience the very reasonable question of what exactly a man with his kind of jewelry collection would want with a piece of that scale. And whether Blueface stole it or did not steal it, whether Chrisean left it in his car or is fabricating the whole story, the fact that Chrisean chose that hill to publicly plant a flag on tells you her judgment on what constitutes a worthy public accusation is completely fried. Because when you are the mother of a 2-year-old with unresolved medical needs, and the biggest headline you are trying to generate is about a piece of jewelry, your priorities are advertising themselves. Now, I want to talk about the way Chrisean is currently packaging her personality, because it deserves its own dedicated segment, and I do not think anyone has laid this out with the specificity it requires. Chrisean has, over the past several months, adopted a very particular vocabulary set, and that vocabulary set is not accidental. Chrisean is now using words like healing, growth, alignment, energy, frequency, light, darkness, elevation, and prosperity in almost every extended stream she goes on. Those words are not Chrisean's words. Those words are borrowed from a specific corner of self-help culture that has been trending on female-focused social media for the last 2 or 3 years, and Chrisean is using them as a costume, because Chrisean has correctly identified that the vocabulary of healing plays extremely well with audiences who are hungry to see a chaotic woman redeem herself. The problem is that a vocabulary is not a transformation. Saying you are healed is not the same as being healed. Saying you have grown is not the same as having grown. And every time Chrisean deploys one of these self-help buzzwords on a live stream, the audience has watched enough of her behavior to notice the gap between the sentence and the action. Chrisean called Blueface a spirit leech. That is a beautiful sentence. That is a sentence that plays well in a caption, that clips well to Instagram, and that gets nodding responses from the exact demographic Chrisean is trying to recruit into her defense. But the sentence has to survive scrutiny, and the scrutiny is simple. Who is the one following the other one around a city for 6 hours? Who is the one pushing back a flight to spend a Sunday on somebody else's boat? Who is the one texting somebody else calling him Papa and Dada? A spirit leech does not chase. A spirit leech does not beg. A spirit leech does not book flights. If Blueface is the leech in this dynamic, why is Chrisean the one visibly attaching herself to him at every opportunity? The sentence collapses the second you apply the facts to it. And Chrisean's entire self-help vocabulary is collapsing in the same way, one buzzword at a time, because none of her actions are backing up her language. And speaking of the language, let us talk about the God pivot, because Chrisean is now invoking the name of God with alarming regularity every time she is caught in a contradiction. God is on Chrisean's side. God is guarding Chrisean's peace. God is directing Chrisean's steps. God is elevating Chrisean above her enemies. Every single one of those sentences is scripturally intelligible, and every single one of those sentences is also being deployed as a shield to deflect legitimate criticism. Because when a public figure who is being asked serious questions about the medical care of her child responds with a Bible verse instead of an answer, that Bible verse is not doing the work of faith. That Bible verse is doing the work of a smokescreen. And I say that as somebody who takes faith seriously, because people who take faith seriously understand that God does not send you scripture as a substitute for pediatric appointments. The God pivot is another costume in the Chrisean wardrobe, and the audience is starting to see the price tag hanging off the back of it. Let me pull Nevaeh into the frame for a second, because Nevaeh is playing a role in this saga that a lot of people have not fully understood, and it is worth pausing on. Nevaeh is the woman Blueface is now claiming is the current occupant of the seat Chrisean once held. Nevaeh has been positioned in Blueface's recent content as the mother of his household, as the woman he is loyal to, as the woman whose child, in his words, occupies the position of firstborn in his heart. And whether you believe Blueface's framing of Nevaeh or you view her as another rotating cast member in the same roadshow that eventually turns on everybody it elevates, the strategic function of Nevaeh in the current storyline is clear. Nevaeh exists, in Blueface's narrative, to prove that Chrisean is replaceable. Nevaeh is the evidence Blueface points to every time he wants to close a door on Chrisean. Nevaeh is the counterexample Blueface deploys when he wants to sell the audience the idea that he has moved on. And Chrisean, whether she admits it or not, is fully aware of Nevaeh's function in that narrative, which is why so much of Chrisean's recent behavior is quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, aimed at destabilizing Nevaeh's position. Chrisean has been suggesting, on stream after stream, that Nevaeh is not mentally strong enough to occupy the household, that Nevaeh is a placeholder, that Nevaeh is a temporary arrangement, that Nevaeh should step aside voluntarily and return the seat to the original occupant. Chrisean has framed this in language that sounds concerned on the surface, as if she is worried about Nevaeh's welfare, but the subtext is transparent. Chrisean does not want Nevaeh healed. Chrisean wants Nevaeh gone. And every so-called concern Chrisean has publicly expressed about Nevaeh has been engineered to weaken Nevaeh's standing in Blueface's household, in the hope that Blueface will eventually reopen the door Chrisean has been kicking at from the outside. That is not sisterhood. That is territorial displacement dressed up as compassion. And Jaden deserves a mention here too, because Jaden was the placeholder before Nevaeh. Jaden had her own chapter in the roadshow, and Jaden is now sitting on the sidelines watching two other women fight over a seat she already knows the price of. Whatever anyone thinks of Jaden, and there are a lot of opinions about her, Jaden's silence during this particular week is instructive. Jaden is not commenting on the 6-hour drive. Jaden is not commenting on the boat. Jaden is not commenting on the audio. Jaden is watching, the way somebody watches a rerun of a movie they already know the ending to, because Jaden already lived through her own version of this exact storyline and Jaden knows exactly how the third act ends. That silence is the loudest endorsement of every single warning that has been given to Nevaeh, and to Chrisean, and to every other woman who has ever considered stepping into Blueface's household expecting a different outcome than the one Jaden already got. Those contradictions is being catalogued by an audience that has finally stopped granting Chrisean the benefit of the doubt. Which brings us back to Junior. And I promise you, this is the part of the coverage that matters most, and this is the part one I'm not going to rush through, because Junior is the only person in this entire saga whose situation cannot be fixed with a comment section apology. Junior cannot log on and tell his own story. Junior cannot post a rebuttal video. Junior cannot correct the record. Junior cannot even see the record clearly enough to know it exists. And that means everybody else in this story owes Junior a duty of care that they have collectively, spectacularly, and repeatedly failed to fulfill. I want to know where you stand on this one. Do you believe Blueface for the first time in his career, or do you still think this is a man rewriting history to protect his own image? Do you think Chrisean is genuinely trying to heal, or do you think the healing language is a costume she is wearing to buy sympathy while she books her next flight to Los Angeles? And most importantly, do you think Junior is being cared for the way a child in his condition deserves to be cared for, or do you think the adults around him have finally run out of excuses? Leave your verdict in the comment strip below, because I read every single one, and the comment section on a story like this always tells me more than the story itself ever could. And when you are done, stay tuned, because there is a follow-up piece coming that is going to break down the receipts Blueface has not even played yet, and trust me, the second wave is going to be even harder to look away from than the first. Until then, protect your peace, protect the babies in your own orbit, and I will see you on the very next one.